The screams echoed down the narrow alleyway, like something torn out of a nightmare. A single streetlight flickered, its yellow glow slicing through the mist that rolled over the cracked cobblestones of Main Street. It was midnight in Delphi, Louisiana, a town that usually went silent after 9, but tonight, the silence had been broken by something dreadful. Sheriff Mason Burke was the first to arrive. His headlights cut through the fog as he stepped out of his cruiser, his boots crunching on broken glass. He followed the sound, the faint cry for help, until he saw her. A young woman, no older than 22, lay on the ground near the brick wall behind the old hardware store. Her hand was stretched out, as if reaching for someone. There was blood on her sleeve, on her neck, and a strange symbol drawn beside her in chalk, a spiral, crudely done. Burke's breath caught in his throat. "Oh my God," he whispered, kneeling beside her. Her lips moved faintly. He leaned closer. "Don't let him find me." Then her eyes went still. The sheriff looked around. The alley was empty, save for the shadows and the faint hum of a power line. He felt it then, a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Somewhere in the darkness, someone was watching. He drew his flashlight and swept it through the narrow passage. It landed on something else, something that made his stomach drop. Another spiral. This time, drawn in blood. That was the night Delphi's quiet charm cracked open, spilling fear into every home. Nobody knew who had done it. Nobody knew who would be next. And nobody in town would ever call it just an alley again. They called it Murder Alley. But that night was only the beginning. Delphi was the kind of place you might see on a postcard. White fences, oak trees draped in Spanish moss, and kids riding bikes down the dusty road that led to the general store. The church bell rang every Sunday morning, and the diner always had a fresh pot of coffee waiting. People waved at one another, even if they didn't know each other's names. Everyone said nothing bad ever happened in Delphi. That's why so many folks stayed after high school, married young, and raised families there. It felt safe. Too safe, maybe. But underneath the warmth of small-town smiles, Delphi had its secrets. The old mill by the river hadn't run in years, but people whispered that strange lights flickered inside at night. Teenagers dared each other to go near it, but few ever did. And there was the story of the Spiral Man, a local legend kids used to tell around campfires, the tale of a figure who appeared in the fog, marking walls with spirals before someone vanished. No one really believed it. At least, not until the night of the murder. The victim's name was Emily Carter, a college student home for the summer. She'd been working part-time at the bakery on Main Street. Everyone remembered her bright smile, her kindness, how she always dropped extra cookies in the bags of the neighborhood kids. Her death shook the town to its core. The next morning, Delphi woke up to sirens and police tape. The alley was blocked off. Reporters from Baton Rouge and Lafayette had arrived, and Sheriff Burke stood in front of a crowd of stunned residents, promising answers. But the answers didn't come easily. The security cameras near the alley had gone dark that night. The only witness, a homeless man named Tommy who slept behind the laundromat, said he saw a shadow with no face run toward the woods. No fingerprints, no weapon, no clear motive. Only that eerie spiral. The town changed overnight. Parents kept their children indoors. The diner stayed half empty. At night, you could hear doors locking all up and down Main Street. Even the dogs barked more often, as if they could sense something no one else could. Sheriff Burke didn't sleep much after that. He had known Emily since she was a child. He remembered when her father used to fix his truck, how Emily used to sell lemonade on Maple Street. Now, she was another name on his desk, a file marked unsolved. Days turned into weeks, and the fear began to settle into something heavier, silence. The kind of silence that made people talk in whispers as if the killer might be listening. But just when Delphi began to think the nightmare was over, another symbol appeared. It was early morning when a delivery driver spotted it, on the wall behind the library, near where the old train tracks ended. Another spiral. This one bigger, darker, as if smeared by a shaking hand. Burke rushed to the scene, his heart pounding. There was no body this time, no witness, just that same haunting mark. The forensics team took samples, but nothing matched anything in their system. It didn't make sense. And yet, deep down, Burke had the sinking feeling that this wasn't over. That same night, the power went out across the town. For 3 full minutes, Delphi went completely dark. And in that darkness, one family, living just a block from the alley, heard something moving outside their window. A slow scrape, like metal dragging against brick. When the lights flickered back on, there was a spiral drawn on their back door. The mother screamed. The sheriff's phone rang moments later. Something was happening in Delphi again. Burke drove through the empty streets, his siren cutting through the fog. The same dread from that first night returned. As he turned onto Maple Avenue, he saw the crowd forming in front of the old Carter house, Emily's house. Neighbors pointed, murmured, some crying. On the porch steps, under the weak glow of the streetlight, was a small wooden box. No one had touched it. Burke approached slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. He knelt, lifted the lid, and froze. Inside, neatly folded, was Emily Carter's locket, the one she had been wearing the night she died. But it wasn't just the locket. There was also a note, a single piece of paper, handwritten in red ink. "You forgot me, but I never forgot you." Burke felt the air leave his chest. Someone was playing a game, a cruel one. He looked up at the quiet crowd, their faces pale with fear. And then, from the end of the street, came a sound no one would ever forget. The squeal of tires. A dark van speeding away into the night. Burke jumped into his car, his lights flashing, and tore down the road after it. But by the time he reached the next turn, the van had vanished. Only the fog remained. The people of Delphi would later say that was the moment they realized something much deeper was happening, something that went beyond a single murder. The town wasn't just afraid anymore. It was being hunted. And, the worst part? No one knew by who. The sound of sirens still echoed faintly in the night as Sheriff Mason Burke stood alone at the end of Maple Avenue. The fog was thicker now, curling around the lampposts like smoke. His headlights dimmed through the mist, and the only thing louder than the hum of his engine was the pounding of his heart. The van had disappeared into the swamp road that led out of town, a stretch of land so dark and winding, locals called it the throat of Delphi. He waited for backup, but the radio stayed quiet. Static crackled, then faded. The dispatcher's voice never came through. It was as if the whole town had gone silent, listening. Burke gripped the steering wheel. The wooden box from Emily Carter's porch sat on the passenger seat beside him, still open, the note resting on top. He read it again, even though every word was already burned into his memory. "You forgot me, but I never forgot you." He didn't want to admit it, but the handwriting looked familiar. By morning, word had spread faster than wildfire. The van sighting, the box, the note, every detail had made its way around the diner, the church steps, and the gas station on Highway 9. In Delphi, news didn't need a newspaper. It traveled through whispers. Miss Jean from the bakery told customers she'd seen the van before. Said it parked near the alley a few nights before the murder, right before closing. A white logo on the side, letters she couldn't quite make out. Maybe D&S repairs. Maybe something else. Sheriff Burke sent Deputy Miller to check it out, but Miller came back shaking his head. No such company was listed anywhere nearby. That was the thing about Delphi. Sometimes things appeared that weren't supposed to exist. Burke walked through town, trying to piece together the puzzle in his mind. Every building felt older than it was. The bricks, the faded signs, even the air had a weight to it. The locals smiled when he passed, but their eyes looked different now. Nervous, questioning. He stopped at the alley again. The police tape fluttered in the morning breeze. A few reporters from Baton Rouge were there, snapping pictures. One asked, "Sheriff, any updates on the Delphi murder?" Burke didn't answer. He just looked down at the spiral still faintly visible on the bricks. It had been scrubbed, but not enough. You could still see the outline, ghost-like. That's when something strange caught his attention. Near the base of the wall, just below the spiral, was a small scrap of paper stuck to the wet brick. He pulled on a glove, peeled it off carefully, and held it to the light. It was torn from a notebook. On it, in tiny writing, were the words, "Look behind the mill." The old mill stood on the edge of Delphi, near where the bayou met the woods. It hadn't run since the late 1980s, when a fire gutted half of it. People said it was haunted, but mostly it was just forgotten, overgrown with vines, its windows broken, its metal roof rusting away. Burke called for backup again, but the signal was weak. He didn't wait. He drove down the dirt road that led to the mill, his tires kicking up dust and gravel. As he got closer, he noticed something odd, fresh footprints in the mud. 2 sets. One larger, one smaller, both leading toward the back of the mill. He parked the car and stepped out, flashlight in hand. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the smell of rain and rust. A loose shutter creaked in the wind. Somewhere inside, something clanged, a piece of metal maybe, or something moving. Burke's beam cut through the dark as he stepped through the open doorway. The floorboards groaned under his boots. "Anyone here?" he called out. No answer. Just the distant drip of water. Then his light caught something. On one of the old wooden beams near the far wall, someone had drawn another spiral. This one larger than the others, painted in thick black ink. And beneath it, a message scrawled in jagged letters. This is where it started. He felt a chill run down his spine. The wood smelled faintly of paint and something else, something older. He crouched down, shining his light along the floor. That's when he noticed a small, rusted lockbox half buried in the dust. It looked ancient, with initials carved into the top. E.C. Burke's pulse quickened. Emily Carter's initials. He reached into his pocket for a knife and pried the box open. Inside there were 3 things: a small key, a folded photograph, and a silver ring, tarnished with age. The photograph showed a group of teenagers standing in front of the Delphi High Gym. 4 of them. Emily was one. The others were faces Burke recognized from around town, young once, now adults with their own families. He turned the photo over. On the back, in faded pen, someone had written, "The Pact. Summer '09. Burke frowned. The year Emily graduated high school. He didn't hear the footsteps until they were close. Quick, sharp, behind him. He turned just as something hit the wall near his head, a stone, thrown hard. It clattered to the ground beside him. Burke raised his flashlight and swept it across the shadows. "Who's there?" he called out. For a split second, he saw movement, a silhouette darting between the beams. Then silence. He stepped forward cautiously, heart hammering. The figure was gone. But at the far end of the mill, just before the exit, something new had appeared on the wall. Another spiral, still wet. He backed away slowly. Whoever it was, they were here just moments ago. Watching him. Waiting. Burke turned and ran back to his cruiser. As he climbed inside, he saw the faint reflection of something in his rearview mirror. A figure, standing just beyond the mill door. Tall. Still. Watching him go. Back in town, Burke called a meeting at the station. Deputies gathered around, tense. He spread the photo on the table. "That's Emily," he said, pointing. "But these 3 others, I want names." Deputy Miller leaned forward. "That's Mark Denton. Runs the hardware store. The girl beside him's Lacey Turner, teaches at the middle school. And that one on the end," he hesitated. "That's Dean Porter. Moved away years ago. Used to be her boyfriend." Burke nodded slowly. "Find out where Porter is now." Miller frowned. "You think this has something to do with her death?" Burke didn't answer right away. He looked down at the spiral symbol again, drawn on one of the photo's corners in faint blue pen. "I think whatever happened back then," he said quietly, "didn't stay buried." That night, the rain came down hard. The thunder rolled across the bayou like drums. Burke sat alone in his office, staring at the evidence board. Emily's photo, the spirals, the map of Delphi with pins marking each location. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. He looked up, frowning. Then, from the corner of the room, his desk phone began to ring. Slowly, he picked it up. Sheriff Burke. For a moment, nothing but static. Then a voice, distorted, low, almost whispering. "You should have stayed away from the mill." The line went dead. Burke's heart skipped. He stared at the receiver, his hand trembling slightly. Outside, the storm howled through the trees. And somewhere, deep in the dark, the watcher from the mill smiled. Because the game had only just begun.